All right, so this week in Southern California, a lot has been going on. We're going to dive into some of the biggest stories shaping the region. And really, it's a mix of everything, from these really personal dreams for a better life, all the way to huge political decisions that, impact millions of people. So, yeah, let's get right into it.
So, here's where we're headed. We're going to start with this really powerful conversation happening in the community all about wealth and opportunity. Then, we'll shift gears and take you to the front lines of a healthcare crisis playing out in the Central Valley. And to wrap things up, we'll do a quick fire round on the legal and political fights that are, right now, defining California's future.
Okay, so first up, let's head over to the California African American Museum. There was this incredible gathering there. You had community leaders, thinkers, regular folks. And what's cool is they weren't just there to talk about problems. No, they were there to actually imagine what the future could look like, to dream up some pretty radical new possibilities for Black families.
And this quote, it really hits you. There's a story behind it. Supervisor Holly Mitchell was talking about this dreaming exercise they did, and she remembers this one young woman. While other people were dreaming about traveling the world or landing a dream job, this woman's dream was just a two-bedroom apartment near a hospital. And that's because she was so worried about her mom's health and where they were going to live. It's just such a stark reminder of how these huge systemic problems can literally shrink the size of our dreams. And that's where this number comes in, 228. It just puts that challenge into perspective, right? That young woman's story isn't just a one-off. It's a snapshot of this massive systemic gap. One of the panelists, George Fothery, he brought up this 2016 study that said, at the current pace, it would take 228 years for Black families to have the same amount of wealth as white families. I mean, when you hear that, it frames the entire conversation in a whole new light.
But the talk wasn't all doom and gloom. It was really about, okay, so what do we do about it? And that same panelist, George Fothery, he laid out this really interesting three-part plan. And what feels so different about it is that it's not just about small policy changes. It starts with digging into the past, documenting stories of loss. Then it's about building smart alliances. And finally, it's about coming up with truly bold, even radical new solutions. So it's not about patching up the old system, it's about building something entirely new.
All right, let's shift gears a bit. We've been talking about dreaming of a secure future. Well, our next story is about the fight for something that should be a basic part of that security: healthcare. We're going to take a look at these community clinics, like Clinica Sierra Vista, and they are right on the front lines of a massive policy change happening in California. So, picture this. East Bakersfield. For so many people there, clinics like Clinica Sierra Vista, they aren't just buildings. They are absolute lifelines. And we can really see what's at stake through the eyes of people like Maria, an undocumented immigrant. She walked into the clinic with this one huge question on her mind. In a state that just changed all the rules, could she still get health insurance?
In this timeline, it really tells the story. For about a decade, you see this incredible progress, right? California was moving step by step toward covering everyone, no matter their immigration status. First kids, then young adults, then older adults, and finally, this year, everyone else. It was this historic moment. And then, bam, a state budget freeze just slammed the doors shut. If you weren't already enrolled, you're now locked out.
And what makes that reversal so jarring is when you think back to 2021. Governor Newsom was actually at Clinica Sierra Vista, the very same clinic, signing one of the expansion bills into law. He called it a point of pride, a symbol of California's values. Fast forward just a few years, and that same policy is frozen solid. The whiplash is pretty intense.
So, what's left for people who need care? Well, it basically boils down to this choice. On one hand, you've got Medi-Cal, but for new folks, it's a closed door. And even if you're on it, it's shaky. Make a little too much money one month, you could lose your coverage for good. So on the other hand, you have the Clinic Zone program. It's this sliding fee scale, kind of like the safety net under the safety net. And for thousands of people, it's become their only option.
And just look at the sheer scale of the work they're doing. Over 33,000 people. That's how many folks this one clinic helped with insurance stuff in just one county in 1 year. Think about that. They're basically the human glue holding this whole thing together while the official system is stepping back.
And at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. This quote comes from a couple, Martha and Octavio, who've been going to the clinic for 20 years. When they were asked what they would do if it wasn't there, their answer was just simple and honestly pretty chilling. They said, "We would not go to see a doctor." It really doesn't get more direct than that when you're talking about life and death consequences.
Okay, for our last segment, we're going to zoom out and do a kind of rapid-fire look at three big political stories bubbling up in California right now. We're talking everything from what's happening in schools to what you'll see on your ballot.
First up, there's a huge lawsuit brewing in Los Angeles, and it all centers on this program with a long acronym, PHBAO. Basically, it stands for Predominantly Hispanic, Black, Asian, and Other. It's a policy that's been around for decades, and the idea is to give schools in neighborhoods with fewer than 30% white residents some extra funding and other advantages to try and combat segregation.
Well, now the Department of Justice has gotten involved. They've joined a lawsuit that calls the program an unlawful form of racial discrimination. The argument is that it unfairly gives resources based on race. Now, LAUSD, the school district, they're not commenting on the lawsuit while it's ongoing, but they did put out a statement saying they're committed to making sure every single student gets access to a great education.
Okay, next topic, public safety. There's a new report out from the Public Policy Institute of California, and it really paints a complex picture of crime in the state. You might hear that things are getting better overall, and they are in some ways, but you really have to dig into the details to see what's actually happening.
And yeah, this chart breaks it down perfectly. So look, the good news is that serious violent crimes like homicides and robberies, they're down pretty significantly this year. That's great. But then you look over at property crimes. Car thefts, they're down a bit this year, but still way, way up, almost 20% higher than before the pandemic. And shoplifting is just kept going up and up. It's nearly 50% higher than it was in 2019. So the big takeaway is that it's a really mixed bag out there.
And for our final item, let's look to the future, specifically the 2026 ballot. There's a measure coming that tackles one of the biggest questions in all of politics: who pays for our elections?
It's called the California Fair Elections Act, and here's what it would do, in a nutshell. Right now, there's a statewide ban on using public funds for political campaigns. This act would get rid of that ban. It would basically give cities and counties the green light to set up their own public financing systems if they want to. The whole idea is to make small dollar donations from regular people more powerful, and in theory, lessen the influence of giant corporations and wealthy donors.
And this quote from one of the main supporters really gets to the heart of why they're pushing for this. They say it's all about restoring trust and accountability. The goal is to rebalance the scales, so that candidates who aren't connected to big money, think of a teacher or a local business owner, could actually have a fair shot at running for office.
So that really leaves us with this final massive question. We know for a fact that big money has spent over $1 billion on California campaigns just since 2020. So the question this ballot measure really asks voters is, if you change how elections are paid for, if you prioritize small donors, could that actually reshape the entire future of California? It's a huge thing to think about.